Hello, and welcome to episode 18 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. It is late in the evening on March 22nd, 2015. The first weekend of the NCAA tournament is over, and Duke is still alive. I am your host this week, Sam Klein. I am joined by my usual cohort. We've got Jason Evans.
Hey, by the way, did you see the really funny commercial with Charles Barkley, Spike Lee, and Samuel L. Jackson where they're checking in a hotel?
Oh my God, I totally missed that commercial. What happened?
Okay. So really funny commercial. They're checking into a hotel and they're joking about the fact that Samuel L. Jackson uses his real name to check into the hotel. And Charles Barkley says, oh, no, I check in under a fake name. I check in under the name of Barles Charkley. So I think you should introduce me as Ethan Jevons.
So this week we've got Ethan Jevons. Hello.
That was not funny. I don't know why I had us do that, but I saw that damn commercial so much this weekend during the games. It's a really funny commercial. I don't know why I did that.
You can introduce me as Mars Blackman.
The commercial that I saw the most was the bracket curls. I feel like that was
with Clyde Drexler.
Yeah.
With Clyde Drexler.
Yeah.
I will say this: the commercial with Christian Laettner resting on his laurels is friggin' awesome.
That's a lot of laurels.
And now that we've gotten Jason's extended commercial intro, we're also joined by Ronald Dine.
I actually go by Mars Blackman.
All right. Now that we are off to a sufficiently silly Sunday evening version of this podcast, let's dive right into what we saw this weekend. We'll start with Duke. We had two games this weekend. Our first, I suppose it's still called the second round game, was a victory over Robert Morris. It was 85-56. And then in the second round game, or the third round, I suppose, that happened this afternoon, Duke took out a talented San Diego State squad, 68-49. Donald, I'll start with you. Give me your impressions from this opening weekend from the Duke Blue Devils.
It was minus maybe 5 minutes in both games where we let them go into like a 10-0 run, both Robert Morris and San Diego State. I thought we played awesome this weekend. We put our pedal to the metal and really didn't let up for most of the game. We closed them out. They were victories that were wide in margin and also easy on the soul, as far as there was not a lot to worry about with these games. I thought everybody, contributed a lot in the first game against Robert Morris. We saw Marshall Plumlee solidify his place in the lottery for the NBA draft once again with a double-double. And then this time, today against San Diego State, it was the Justice and Josh show, and both of them had fantastic games. Justice it was probably one of the great games that he has had so far this year. A little fun stat: there's this hidden stat that a lot of people don't know about called the 0-0. And if you have a 0-0 game, that means that on the stat line you have a number that is not zero in every single category. And Justice today had 13 points, 12 boards, 5 assists, 4 steals, and 3 blocks for his 6th 0-0 game of the season. And that is 3 times the second place person on our team, Tyus Jones. So that means that he's contributing in every single category, contributing in every area, in every facet of the game. He was all over the place today, and I think he was the catalyst for us getting back to his hometown. We're going to Houston, guys.
Yeah, I think that Winslow certainly was the key to the victory today. Jason, what did you have to add from this weekend?
Well, I mean, what a fun weekend to be a Duke fan. There's always this tension when you're involved in the NCAA tournament because you're afraid the next loss is the end of the season, and we go into the great waiting period over the summer and fall as we wait for basketball to start up again. And especially in this case where we think, we're going to lose a number of players who are really special. And it got to be a weekend where there really wasn't very much tension at all. I'm sure you guys saw the statistic that Duke led by double figures in 61 out of 80 minutes this weekend. That's crazy number. That's just a huge amount of time that we had a really comfortable lead. I really liked the fact that when San Diego State made a little bit of a run today and cut it to 7, we stretched it right back out, and the same thing sort of happened with Robert Morris. They made a little run, cut it from 20 down to 10, and then we immediately stretched it back out. There wasn't even a prolonged period of going back and forth and seeing whether or not we would hold on to this lead. I love the way we're playing defense. And now San Diego State, no one's going to mistake them for one of the great offensive powers in the college basketball game. They're not a very good offensive team as we witnessed today, but still, the way Duke was blocking shots, the way Duke was getting in the passing lanes and disrupting things, just the activity that we had on the defensive end was the kind of thing you just haven't seen from Duke that much this year, and it's so encouraging as we move forward, against opponents that are obviously progressively going to get better and better and better. To see Duke playing defense this way, you start to really think, well, this is a team that really can and really will contend for the national title. And I think I had a couple friends say on email to me this afternoon after Duke won the game, they said Duke's going to go from the team that all the experts were saying was going to be the one seed that wouldn't make the Final Four. We're now instantly going to go to the team that all the experts are saying is the team that has the best chance to beat Kentucky. And I think that is what they're going to say, and I think that's probably true. You talked a little bit about some individual things. Before I get to any individual thing, an incredible statistic. So Duke shot 54.5% in this game. We were 30 of 55. 54%. I want you to appreciate what that means against San Diego State. San Diego State hasn't allowed an opponent to hit half their shots, to hit 50% of their shots in 40 games. In other words, this entire season and, a good third of last season, no one has hit 50% of their shots. And Duke hit 54% of their shots. And, to me, as great as Winslow was, and boy, he was fabulous, the story of this game was that Jahlil Okafor was able to do whatever he wanted on the interior. He got nothing but high quality, high percentage shots. And oh my God, he even hit 2 out of 2 free throws on the game, which is something we haven't seen in a while. So, and he set the tone early, and Justice, I think, the tone on the backboards, making sure we got a lot of rebounds. I don't want to say the game was over at halftime, not by any stretch of the imagination, but boy, it sure didn't feel like we got challenged at all in the second half. All right, Sam, your turn.
Okay. I got a few things. The first was that this weekend kind of felt like, and you guys tell me if you think that I'm onto something here. This weekend kind of felt like one of those weekends in November where we have to play 2 games in, one of those exempt tournaments, but we get to play them on campus. So we might get, good teams. We might get teams that are headed for the tournament, but we're getting them sort of in our environment. And in those games, in the last however many years, Duke has just been very solid. And it doesn't feel like those games are ever games we worry about. And obviously the NCAA tournament feels differently because if you lose, you go home. But it felt like this team sort of had the poise that they have in Cameron in November, where the crowd is with them, and it just feels like they're gonna roll through those opponents. While looking ahead to if we have those games one weekend in November, the next weekend is going to be the actual Final Four for those exempt tournaments, and the quality of those Final Fours is probably similar to what we see in a regional final weekend. So next weekend we've got Utah, UCLA, and Gonzaga, which is probably similar to what we would see in the exempt tournament that we played in Brooklyn this year, where we got to see Stanford and a couple other teams. I think that this mirrors that early season preparation really well, and we always talk about, how come Duke plays all these neutral site events early in the season? Well, this is why. It's because those events really mirror sort of what the postseason looks like. Does that resonate with you guys at all?
It does with me. I think that's a very apt comparison, and your comment about the early neutral, well, not neutral, the early games in Cameron. While clearly this wasn't Cameron, it was close to home, and I agree about the sort of the way the games felt, the tone of the way the games felt. You were playing a decent team, but you were never very, very worried, which was nice.
Yeah. So I was impressed with San Diego State. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Donald.
No, I was going to say that Coach K, we've heard a lot about how he takes these tournaments, whether they're preseason, the ACC tournament or the NCAA tournament, and he breaks them down to its, basically core. So, this weekend he treated it as a 2-game tournament that we've won. And so it's kind of good that he gets his teams to lock in to those 2 games. And because, you really can't focus on anything other than the next game in front of you and things like the NCAA tournament. So it's really easy for him to say, guys, okay, we got a 3-day tournament, 2 games. Let's get past these 2 games. Then we could talk about next week, because if we don't get past these 2 games, there is no next week. So I think that's really what our players were talking about all weekend, and what coaches have been harping on, this whole season, is taking these little mini tournaments, and the preseason tournaments are no exception, and that's what we've been building on up to this point.
Yeah, so I think it makes a lot of sense, and I do appreciate that he prepares the team in that way to handle those small chunks. Looking specifically at the game today against San Diego State, which I said I like the San Diego State team. I like the way that they move on defense. After the game, I watched a little bit of Steve Fisher's press conference, and he looked. It might just be because he's old, but he looked sort of shell-shocked at what had happened to his team. They were asking him questions about, what could you guys have done differently? And he was like, man, that Duke team was really good. You can't. There's only so much that you can do to prepare for, 7-foot Jalil Okafor making every tiny post move and every nifty move around the basket that he did. So it's a credit to Duke that they played, especially Okafor and Winslow, sort of up to that potential. You guys have mentioned Justice Winslow, but it really felt like he set the tone today in the first half, making good plays on both sides of the ball, getting the one awesome block. I don't remember who the San Diego State player was, but he had the one block on the breakaway that led to a Tyus Jones taking the ball back down to our end and making an easy basket. Justice really felt like the catalyst today, and then with Okafor, he only got to take 2 free throws today, and I think Jason mentioned it, that he hit both of them. He feels a lot more comfortable shooting those. It seems like he feels more comfortable shooting free throws now. And we noticed early in the game that he took a couple shots from around the free throw line, and they were jumpers that he sort of just took in stride. And my friend Mike actually texted me during the game and said, it would make more sense if Jalil Okafor just took his free throws as jump shots. And I thought, it'd be great if the ref passes him the ball, and as soon as he gets to the ball, he just winds up and shoots. And it looks like he's kind of adopted that strategy a little bit to some degree. He's obviously not taking jump shots, but he's trying to make that motion a little bit more fluid. And it seems like it's paying off for him. And going into the tournament, I think that a lot of folks pointed out that this Duke team is very talented in lots of ways, but one very obvious flaw. And one that I think we might get to when we talk about Utah and what their defensive strategy is against Duke, is that you can foul Okafor and he's not going to make those foul shots reliably at the end of games. Today it wasn't much of an issue. Duke didn't get to shoot that many free throws at all today. But the fact that he made his 2, I think says a lot about where this team's ceiling might be, because if that's not an issue, then we've cut out one of the big issues for this team.
Well, let me give you 2 really quick comments related to what you were just saying. A friend of mine pointed out that Jalil Okafor was 12 of 16 from the floor and only took 2 free throws. And this friend said, it's unconscionable that Steve Fisher didn't have San Diego State fouling Jalil Okafor more than that. How can you only have Jalil Okafor take 2 free throws? Your defensive strategy should be that he takes more like 8 or 10 free throws, because those are buckets that he has to earn at the free throw line that he ordinarily would earn just by putting the ball through the basket for 2 points. And that if he's going to get a good look, you should foul him instead. And the other thing I wanted to mention, you said Steve Fisher, looked shell-shocked. The announcers were talking throughout much of the game about the fact that Steve Fisher and many of the guys on the San Diego State coaching staff are suffering from some kind of flu bug or something like that, which led a friend of mine to comment and say, I hope that the entire Duke team uses a gallon of Purell after they go through the line and shake hands with these guys. The last thing we need is anybody catching a cold.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think that with that defensive strategy on Okafor, Jalil Okafor, I think today made more individual crafty post moves than we've seen him make in any game so far this season. Obviously, he's had games where he scored more points. He had 26 today, and I want to say that his high for the season has been like 29 or 30. But it felt like most of the shots that he made today were him getting the ball and then doing something creative, with the ball in his hands, moving his feet, and getting himself in a position to take a shot that he's good at. Sort of the, we talk about Tim Duncan doing a lot, and so I was impressed in that way. Let's move on quickly before we look at next weekend. I want to talk quickly about the ACC. The ACC had a really strong first weekend. There was only one loss, and that was surprisingly the regular season champion Virginia Cavaliers were taken down today in a foul fest by Michigan State. But otherwise, everybody in the ACC has advanced to the second weekend, including an NC State team that took out the one-seeded Villanova in the East region. So, Donald, I'll go to you. What did you see from the ACC this weekend? What stood out to you?
Well, first of all, if you were in a pool with your buddies about which ACC team would be the first one to be eliminated from the tournament, and you picked Virginia, you probably would have been laughed at by all of your buddies, and you would have won that pool. And it's very interesting. Justin Anderson was a shell of himself, and UVA, I think, found out the hard way that in the NCAA tournament, no matter how tenacious your defense may be, you have to score points to win these games. And you can't get away with scoring 54 points against any team in this tournament and thinking you're going to win an NCAA tournament game. So I think that was one of the things that I took away from today. Over the weekend, unquestionably, NC State's win over Villanova was the biggest win of the entire tournament so far, probably. Villanova being the first one seed to go down, and NC State getting to go to the Carrier Dome, which is a familiar ground for ACC teams. They didn't get to play there this year, but they will take on Louisville, who, as we're recording, just won against Northern Iowa. They did play in the Carrier Dome. So the ACC is guaranteed to have at least one team in the Elite Eight because Louisville and NC State play each other. A tremendous weekend, the best conference performance of the weekend by far.
Here's something to add to that. The all-time record for wins by a conference in the first two rounds was by the old Big East. One year when they had, I think they had 8 teams in the tournament a few years ago, and they got 11 wins in the first two rounds. The ACC with 6 teams got 11 wins. The ACC's record of 11-1 is absolutely stunning. I agree. I can't believe that Virginia was the one team to lose. There was a really, really funny tweet by Brian Phillips of Grantland, who during the Virginia-Michigan State game in the second half tweeted and said, "This is just a fascinating tactical chess match between two hobos beating themselves with stolen golf clubs." I love that. And he's right. It was a fascinating tactical chess match between two teams that couldn't shoot straight and just seemed to want to pound and bang on each other as much as they possibly could. All credit to Tom Izzo, who is an incredible, incredible coach. And took his team once again. Everyone said they were underseeded as a number 7 seed. He said, "I don't care," and he went ahead and beat the 2 seed Virginia. But the ACC is the story of the tournament so far. I think the ACC will be favored in many of the games that they're playing this coming up this week. I certainly think that Notre Dame's going to be favored over Wichita State. Duke figures to be a favorite, probably a fairly strong favorite over Utah, NC State or Louisville. That whoever's favored in that game will be an ACC team. So really, really great for the conference. One thing I wanted to add about NC State, Sam, let me ask you. I didn't think NC State played that great a game when they beat Villanova. We've seen NC State play way, way better than this. When they beat us, they played better than this. When they beat Carolina, they played better than this. Now, look, we've seen NC State play a lot worse than that. State is certainly capable of playing horrible, but I was surprised and impressed that State managed to beat a team, as highly regarded as Villanova on a day when I thought they played good, but not great.
Yeah, I think that we saw a really good game from BJ Anya. I think he's often the difference maker for them in that when he's good, it adds such a huge dimension to their team because he's such a good low post defender and he blocks so many shots. But yeah, you're right. I feel like the guards for NC State, the 3-headed monster of Barber, Lacey, and Turner. When NC State is at their best, all 3 of those guys are passing the ball well and shooting and driving and and really making that offense scary. And today, or yesterday, it felt like they were going in spurts. Barber, I think, had a good game. But the other guys, it was like on and off. So, yeah, I thought going into the tournament, I didn't admittedly watch a lot of Villanova this year, but I was like, man, NC State is a scary 8 seed. That's the kind of team that shaky 1 seeds like a Villanova from a weak conference doesn't want to see because they have so much potential. And yeah, they know how to beat a Duke or a UNC like a top seeded type team. And we saw, I think you said, we saw good NC State today, but we didn't see NC State at their peak. They're absolutely capable of beating Louisville. They already have this year. And if they get to see Michigan State in an Elite Eight game, that is going to be it's going to be a slugfest. And I really look forward to seeing the way that NC State potentially attacks, Michigan State's sort of brutal defense that we saw today. So yeah, they are as interesting a team as any that's left in the field, and I believe they're one of the lowest seeds. They're not the lowest seed. UCLA is an 11, but they're one of the lowest seeds that are left, and they're really intriguing. I did want to point out about State. Someone on the board this afternoon, I can't remember who it was, linked us to a preview that Villanova's SB Nation site had put up for the NC State game, the summary of which was basically, this NC State team isn't very good, and we're going to beat them, and here are a bunch of numbers to tell you why. And man, reading it after the game felt embarrassing for those Villanova folks. They seemed to be pretty confident going in that they were going to easily dispatch NC State, and that was certainly not the case. NC State played their game against them and came out with probably one of the best victories of the weekend that we saw from any team in the tournament, sort of outside the Big 12, collectively losing their minds and getting upset all over the place. Anything else?
We didn't talk about. We haven't talked about UNC. We haven't talked about Carolina. They've got.
Yeah.
I thought they had a fairly pedestrian win over Arkansas. I think it's a huge deal for them that Marcus Page, apparently, what we're hearing is that he's sort of finally healthy. Let's not forget that Marcus Page was a preseason All-American, and there was a darn good reason for that because he's a hell of a player. And he took over that game in the second half against Arkansas when Carolina's big men were in massive foul trouble. By the way, the North Carolina-Arkansas game, I have never seen fouls called like it was ridiculous. That there were so many fouls called in that game. But Marcus Page took it over. I don't think Carolina. I think Carolina's going to have real trouble with Wisconsin. That's hard to say, with Wisconsin. I think Carolina's going to have real trouble with Wisconsin, but they've got to feel great about where they are. I mean, look, we're in the Sweet 16 here, and I think there were a lot of Carolina fans who probably suspected they wouldn't quite get this far. And then we haven't talked about Notre Dame. That was just that overtime game. That was such a great game, and I love that Pat Connaughton, who didn't have that fabulous a game, as a senior, hit a huge clutch three, had a great huge block shot. Time was winding down, the final couple seconds, and you guys remember last week I said it. I'm looking forward to Notre Dame, Kentucky. I'm looking forward to Notre Dame, Kentucky, and we're just one game away from it happening.
And also on Notre Dame, we should point out. We found out last night after the game during Mike Bray's press conference that his mother had passed away on Saturday morning, and he still went out and coached the game, and Notre Dame played a hell of a game against Butler. So,
and his players didn't know. His players did not know. He didn't tell his players or anybody.
Yeah, it's amazing that he was able to keep it together like that. I mean, all the credit and the sympathy, of course, in the world to Mike Bray. Who must have been having an incredibly challenging day yesterday, and the pressure of winning an NCAA tournament game obviously is going to feel very small relative to the passing of a parent. And Mike Bray has dealt with questions, I think, over the years about his team's ability to go far in the tournament. They've had a number of years where they've been 3, 4, 5 seeds and got bounced in the first round. And this year they were resilient and outlasted a tough Butler team in the face of him, having that personal adversity. So all the credit to Mike Bray for putting on an incredible performance. I mean, if we're not talking about NC State, we probably should be talking about Mike Bray's, his courage and his strength this weekend. Donald, did you have anything to add to that?
I agree wholeheartedly with you about Mike Bray. It's going to be a difficult week for him. They said he was going to spend some time with his family in Florida. I guess that's where his parents were from, and then would rejoin the team in time for them to make the trip to Cleveland for the Sweet 16. So I think it's going to be a tough week. It's going to be a difficult week for his players as well. There's going to be a lot of things out of the norm with Mike Bray being caught between having to prepare his team for a very important game and also dealing with family matters several states away. So it'll be a difficult week for them for that team, and it'll be interesting to see how they respond. But given how they responded, knowing now what we know yesterday, the man's incredible to even have the courage to put all that aside for a couple hours or for a few hours to play a basketball game or to coach a basketball game. I think that's just remarkable and speaks highly of him.
Yeah. So let's look ahead then. I think we did a good job wrapping sort of Duke and the ACC here in the first weekend of the tournament. Obviously, it was a really good all-around performance from the conference outside of UVA. So looking ahead next weekend, Duke is in Houston, and we've got a Sweet 16 match against a probably underseeded Utah Utes team that had a very successful season. They ended up ranked 8th, I think, in KenPom. Earlier this afternoon, Jason caught up with one of the writers and contributors to Block U, which is the Utah SB Nation site, and he got to ask him a few questions looking ahead at Utah. So let's listen to that interview right now.
I'm joined now by Shane Roberts of Block U, which is the Utah Utes official site on SB Nation. Shane, thanks a lot for coming and talking to us this afternoon. We got a big match coming up against you guys, but we're going to treat each other like friends, not the enemies. Does that sound good?
Oh, absolutely. I think the last time Utah and Duke met was back in the 60s. I think I just saw on Twitter. So it's been a while.
It has been a while, but I know both fan bases really, really excited about this. Can I ask, do you think you guys are a little bit scared maybe of playing Duke, or was this what you wanted?
No, this is what we wanted. I mean, Utah's been off the college basketball radar for a while, but we may not be a blue blood of college basketball, but we're one of the perennial top 10 or top 15 programs in the country, and have been one of the best on the West Coast for a while. So, I mean, playing North Carolina and Kentucky, Arizona, and all those schools as often as we have, I don't think there's any fear in playing Duke. There's just a lot of excitement because in a lot of our lifetimes, we haven't seen Duke and Utah in a matchup like this.
Yes. So let me ask you. Obviously, you've seen Utah play a tremendous amount this year. What are the things that you guys do really, really well?
Well, defend first and foremost. Utah's a top 15 defensive team. They really want to grind it out. They want to slow the game down, make it methodical, keep the game in the 50s and 60s. If Utah scores 70 more points, I want to say they're 19-0 this year. So they like to make teams work for it and earn it because it's all headed by DeLon Wright, about a 6'6", 6'7" point guard that's very long and lengthy, and then it's anchored by Jakob Poeltl, the big 7-footer in the middle that's also long and lanky. So they want teams to shoot over them. They don't want to give up easy buckets, transition buckets, or easy threes. So they want people to grind it out, and they're very good at it.
Now, you mentioned Poeltl. He's just a freshman. The number one key when you talk about defense for stopping Duke has got to be the big man in the middle, Jahlil Okafor, who had a pretty good day today, pretty much owned San Diego State, who's another very good defensive team. How do you think Utah will approach the task of stopping Big Ja?
I mean, that's the $1 million question going into Thursday. I mean, Utah's got 3 7-footers on the roster. They got Poeltl, Dallin Baczynski, who had a very good game yesterday against Georgetown, and then they also have Olsen. I'm spacing on his first name right now for some reason, but
Jeremy Olsen.
Thank you. Yeah. So we got 3 7-footers and 15 fouls to throw at them. Not only that, Utah is kind of a long team. They've got a lot of 6'7", 6'8" to 7-footers on the roster, so they're going to try to pack that paint. Would be my guess, and just make them earn it.
Now, let's get to the other side of the ball. I know people talk about DeLon Wright as a future NBA player. What are you guys doing on offense that's scoring points for you? I know Utah's known as a defensive team, but you've had pretty good offensive efficiency this year.
Yeah, like I said, they want to grind it out and they want to get good shots. So Utah averages about 50% from the field and about 40% from the three-point line. They're very patient. They're methodical. They're not scared to wind up the shot clock all the way down. DeLon Wright is very good at probing a defense and just kind of filling it out. But they're also very good at moving the ball. So, I mean, Utah's not not a one-man scoring crew, if you will. They're very score by committee. DeLon only averages about 14 to 15 points a game, but they get a bunch of contributions from other guys on the floor, like Pirtle, as well as Brandon Taylor, Jordan Loveridge. Those guys really like to camp out and just knock down threes. If those guys are off, then Utah's really struggling. But as evidence, like yesterday against Georgetown, if those guys are hitting, then Utah's very tough to beat. So it's a motion-based offense. They want to keep teams moving and the ball moving, not unlike what you see with like the San Antonio Spurs, a very similar type of concept.
And it appears to me, just from looking at some box scores and stat sheets and things like that, you guys are a pretty deep team. Larry Krystowiak plays a number of players, huh?
Yeah, he's kind of shortened up the bench in the tournament, which has kind of surprised us a little bit. But he's not scared to go 9-10 deep. Utah's a very deep roster, and they're very young. I think that's the big thing that kind of concerns Coach K, is they're a very young team. I mean, there's got Pirtle, who's a freshman. There's Isaiah Wright, who got action on both the first 2 games. He's a freshman. Kyle Kuzma's a freshman. He hit a big 3 yesterday. Barkat Chapman is a player that hasn't played much in the tournament. He's a freshman, but he was a borderline starter for most of the season. Yeah, they're not scared to go deep if they have to. Pirtle's kind of fought foul trouble most of the year. So Baczynski's always got a lot of minutes. So is Olsen. So yeah, they'll go 10 deep if they have to.
I'm amused by this. I didn't know that you all refer to Larry Krystowiak as Coach K also.
Yeah, we called it. Some people kind of call him like the second Coach K or Coach K the second, because a lot of people see his name, and they have a hard time kind of saying Krystowiak. So Coach K has kind of been adapted on the West Coast as well.
I like it. So we know Coach K is going to be happy in our game Friday night. We just don't know which Coach K will be happy.
Yeah, one of them will come away pretty stoked.
There you go. So describe for me, if Utah wins this game, what do you think is the situation? Describe for me how it happens that Utah pulls off the victory Friday night.
Well, they control the pace first. They've done very well dictating pace all year long. They can run if they need to, but they want to slow things down and grind it out a little bit. But they also need a rebound. When Utah's been beaten either by Arizona or UCLA or Oregon, they have a propensity to give up very poor offensive rebounds. It happened in the first half against Georgetown yesterday. They had a whole lot of multiple possession rebounds down the floor to where they would jack up a 3 and then big guy would rebound it, and they would kind of keep this renewance possession. If Utah can control those boards and limit Duke to one and done, Utah puts themselves in a really good chance to win the game.
Okay, well, I'm going to close with you then by asking the operating question, the most important question. Give me your prediction for the game. I know you're a Ute, but give me your prediction.
Well, in my bracket, I actually picked Duke to beat Utah in the Sweet 16. Utah's about a year ahead of schedule, and I don't think a lot of people realize that is with the amount of youth on this team and with a lot of the recruits that Coach K has been pulling in. They're about a year ahead of schedule, if not more. This is a program that's 4 years removed from just winning 6 games. So they've come a long way in a short period of time. If Utah had a little bit more offensive firepower, then I would definitely pick them. But I think Duke right now just has a little bit more than Utah. So I mean, I'll pick Duke. If Utah's hitting from deep, then I like Utah's chances to keep it close and maybe pull off the upset. But Utah has a propensity of going through unfortunate droughts to where they'll go 3 to 5 minutes without scoring a point or getting a field goal, and then all of a sudden, they'll find themselves in a 12 to 15 point hole. That happened against Arizona. So if they can find a way to keep Duke honest as well as hitting the ball from deep, I like their chances, but I have to take Duke.
Shane, thanks so much for joining us and giving us this preview. Shane Roberts of Block U, and I'd wish you good luck on Friday, but I can't wish you too much good luck. Do you understand?
Oh, I'm in the exact same boat.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks to Shane for joining us, and thanks to Jason for doing that interview. We appreciate it on short notice. So let's kind of get reactions from that. Now we've got a good idea sort of who Utah is. Jason, I'll start with you. What stood out from some of the stuff that Shane told us about this youth team?
Well, I don't think Shane talked enough about how efficient they are offensively in terms of their shooting. He mentioned that they've got a few guys who like to go outside and take threes, and they're very good at taking them. This is an exceptionally good team at shooting from long distance. They are 4th in the nation in 3-point field goal percentage. They hit more than almost 41% of their threes, which is a really, really high number. And they're 6th in the nation in overall field goal percentage, hitting 48.7% of their field goals. So they are really, really strong at getting a good shot, especially a shot from the perimeter, and putting it in the bucket. They're obviously also a exceptionally good defensive team. That's sort of what they've hung their hat on. You mentioned Ken Pomeroy liking them so much. One of the major reasons he likes them so much is because of their D. He has them as the 7th most efficient defensive team in the country. So they're going to be a challenge. They're going to be a major challenge for Duke. Now, what they don't do well is they don't rebound. They really, especially offensively, they don't get offensive rebounds hardly at all. They're 300th in the country in offensive rebounds per game, which is a really bad number. And then the other thing they do a lot of is they foul. They foul a tremendous amount. And you heard Shane mention the fact that they've got 3 big men, and they're planning to put 15 fouls up on Jahlil Okafor. I mean, I don't know if they're actually planning on fouling him 15 times, but their attitude is, we got 3 guys, and we're going to send them in there, and we're going to pound on Jahlil. And make him earn his points at the charity stripe as opposed to earning them in the post. And this has been a lot of Utah's strategy all year. They're one of the they have one of the highest foul percentages in all of college basketball. So I think that what you're going to see from them is a very physical game. It's going to be a game where they try to spread the floor and not let Duke's athletes take over too much. It's a tough matchup. Utah was underseeded. People have not seen this team because they play over there on the West Coast, and we're not familiar with what goes on 3 time zones away. But Ken Pomeroy thinks that this is an exceptional team. And Ken Pomeroy is a pretty smart guy when it comes to basketball. All the other statistical measures, all the other computer simulations and things like that all say that Utah is a very, very good club. The only thing that I notice about them that gives me some real hope that I think Duke has a strong chance in this game is that if you look at their schedule, whenever they played really good teams, they pretty much lost. They did a great job of beating bad teams and mediocre to okay teams, but when they played Arizona, they lost. When they played Kansas, they lost. When they played UCLA, they lost. When they played Oregon, they lost. And to me, that's a pretty telling thing when you get this far into the tournament. The only really good, by the way, when they played San Diego State, they lost. San Diego State being the team that Duke just beat down pretty efficiently today. The only really good team they beat was Wichita State. They beat Wichita State in overtime early in the season. But, as I sort of look through the rest of their results, there aren't a ton of wins. There aren't that many wins where you go, wow, that's a team that could still be playing. For the most part, the teams that could still be playing, they lost to when they played them. So I think that's a pretty good sign for Duke coming into this game. Donald, what about you?
So one stat that I noticed from Shane that was very telling is that he said something that Utah was 19-0 when scoring 70 points or more this season, and all of their losses were games that they scored some abysmal numbers at certain points. There was one, I think that even a win against Oregon State back in February, they won 47-37, which is just an atrocious game. I didn't even want to look at the stat line for that, but I think Utah wants to slow the game down, like Shane said. They want to slow the game down. They want to drag it out. They don't want a slugfest. They don't want a shootout. They want to keep it in the 50s and 60s. So, the defense that we're going to need to throw at them is going to be enough to get keep them at their level of comfort in the 60s. But we need to be hitting our shots. We need to get it to Jaleel. Jaleel needs to make free throws. Our whole team needs to make free throws. Really. But I think getting up to 70 points, we don't want to go into a shootout with these guys. But I think they're not going to want to do that. They want to slow the game down. They want to drag it out. They don't want a lot of possessions. They want a lot of one-and-done possessions from us. So we need to, hit the glass, hit the offensive boards if we miss some shots. And on the other end, do the same thing they want to do to us, limit them to one possession. And getting some good shots on offense, I think those are the keys to the game.
Yeah, I'm interested to see the way that we defend their perimeter. They have, I think as Shane mentioned, they have a number of guys that are excellent three-point shooters. So in that way, maybe they'll remind us a little bit of Notre Dame, who was a great shooting team that we obviously faced 3 times this year and lost to twice. But one time we managed to beat them down pretty badly. So I wonder if there might be similarities in the way that we attack this Utah offense on our defensive end, and specifically, they have their excellent scorer in DeLon Wright, who was a big time player for them as a senior this year. Be curious to see how we contain them, because seniors obviously in the tournament play with a little bit different emotion, I think, than the underclassmen do, because they know it's their last time. So yeah, I'm interested to see the way that we attack them on the perimeter and try to limit their shooting, because I think that if we can limit the shooting, then their ability to beat us at their game, goes down significantly. I think it's going to be an interesting matchup. I'm excited to see this team. I haven't gotten to really watch them this year, so I think it'll be a fun game. Although I think that Duke has some of the advantage against this Utah team, but definitely looking forward to it.
It's going to be really interesting to see who for Duke picks up DeLon Wright, because, by the way, DeLon Wright is a future NBA player. In fact, most people project that he's going to be one of the top 20 picks in the NBA draft this coming season, this coming off season. A heck of a ball player, and he has sort of the size and athleticism that I think him a really difficult matchup for Cook. He's sort of a point guard, shooting guard. Very long and tall, and it's going to be interesting to see if Duke tries, does Matt Jones get a shot at him? I think it may be Matt Jones, or it'll be Quinn Cook, one of the two of those, and if we're able to contain him a bit, I think that's going to be a big problem for Utah. There are not a lot of other guys that they have who can create things on their own. As we heard in the preview, I think they're mostly counting him to create his shot, but everyone else is sort of creating shots by moving around and by hoping that they'll be open on their own. So I think that matchup is a tremendously important one for us.
So looking ahead, if Duke manages to beat Utah, I think the plan is, and guys, correct me if I'm wrong, that we'll do a preview for the Elite Eight game after the Utah game. And that would be
that is correct.
Gonzaga or UCLA. Is that right? Are we cool with that?
That is correct, sir. We will be up all night getting a podcast ready for broadcast on early Saturday morning, previewing the Sunday Sunday Final Eight game. Win or lose. If we lose, we'll also be out here talking about what happened. But yeah, if folks are listening right now, wondering when the next podcast is coming up, it'll become late Friday night, early Saturday morning. Hopefully, with a preview of our next opponent.
Yeah, we give the streets what they want.
Right. So just be on the lookout for that in the event, or sort of no matter what happens. We'll be recording on Friday night. The Duke Utah game is going to be Friday night. I want to say at 9:00 Eastern or so. So just be aware of that. Before we wrap up, I want to check in with you guys. I assume that everybody at least filled out one bracket. Whether or not you submitted it into a legal gambling operation is entirely up to you and none of my business. But I'll start with Donald. How's your bracket doing?
Okay, so let's talk about the Sweet 16. The Sweet 16, we got 5 ACC teams. We have 3 Pac-12 teams. We have 2 Big Ten teams, 2 Big 12, 1 Big East, 1 Missouri Valley, 1 SEC, that's Kentucky, and 1 West Coast Conference team. So this week, I'm going to call out the Big 12. We've heard all year from pundits on ESPN, on CBS, about how they're the best conference in basketball, how all their teams are really strong, and in the last week, all I've heard is everything about how they're going to make deep runs in a big dance. Well, I gave them the benefit of the doubt, and they have made my bracket look like trash. In this tournament, they have proven to have hype equal to the first incarnation of the Big East in its final days. 7 teams in the tournament, and within 4 hours, my bracket was done because of the Big East. I have more than any other conference. They had more teams in the tournament, and only Oklahoma and West Virginia made it to the Sweet 16. Of course, I picked one of them. I picked Oklahoma. I did not pick West Virginia. And I'm living at the Big 12. The Big 12, all of you, every team in the conference, all 10 of you in the Big 12, which is a miscalculation. But all of you need to have a seat and think about what you've done, because what you have done is made my bracket look like trash, and you've made a lot of America's bracket look foolish because we trusted you. No more. You guys are done. But my bracket is cool because my Final Four is still in it. Obviously, Duke is still in it. Kentucky is still in it. Wisconsin just won. And I'm forgetting somebody. Who am I forgetting in my bracket?
UVA or
I have
Villanova,
no idea.
they both lost.
Yeah,
they both lost.
Who you got?
I had Louisville. Who I got in the East? I have Louisville.
Louisville, Duke, Kentucky, and Wisconsin.
Yep, those are my 4. So they're still
That's
intact, and I believe I still have 11 sweet. I still have 6 of my 8 Elite 8 teams still active. So we'll see how that goes. But Big 12, shame on you. I'm done with you for the rest of the year.
Well,
all right.
My bracket
has been laid, Jason.
my bracket was ruined for a slightly different reason. I figured that the Pac-12 sucked. I also figured that the SEC sucked. So I said, aside from Kentucky and aside from Arizona, I had no Pac-12 and no SEC teams winning any games. And that didn't work out for me too well. You had Oregon and UCLA. I mean, I had UCLA going down to SMU. I had SMU beating Iowa State. I was feeling great about things, and then bleh, it was all UCLA. And so yeah, the Pac-12 ruined my bracket by doing really well. And then the other thing that ruined my bracket was the one Final Four team I've lost is Virginia. I really thought that Justin Anderson getting another week would make Virginia back into the team that was 26-1 at one point and really looked like they were every bit one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the country through the late January or early February when Justin Anderson went down. And I was wrong. Justin Anderson never even came close to becoming the player that he was earlier in the season. And I by the way, I feel terrible for Virginia that their season ended the way it did. If I was a Virginia fan, I would just be cursing the gods that took Justin Anderson away from us and then took him away again for the appendectomy just when it looked like he was going to come back and have a little more time to get back into the swing of things. I mean, I know Virginia fans had to feel like this was their year. They were an outstanding team all season long until the very end, and then they lost 3 of 5, I think, at 3 of their final 5 games, something like that. I mean, the team was 26-1. They lost 3 of their final 5. So that's Virginia and the Pac-12 for the most part have ruined my bracket. I had Utah losing to Stephen F. Austin. So what do I know?
Does what you know. I thought that I had a good peg on the Big 12. I thought some of them were okay and some of them weren't. It turns out I had all the wrong picks in the Big 12. The one Big 12 team that I decided to throw some trust in was Baylor, and I made the bold claim that Baylor was going to come out of the West region. That was wrong. Baylor lost in the first round of Georgia State. And
by the way, the best moment of the entire tournament so far is Coach Hunter falling off his stool when RJ hits the 3 to win the game. That was awesome.
And then when they lost over the weekend, the embrace that they had of Ron Hunter and his son RJ, it was that was like the stuff of tournament legend. That that's the kind of stuff that ends up in the highlight reels forever. Is them winning the one game and then bowing out in the next game. But the emotion on Coach Ron Hunter was really splendid. Donald, what were you saying?
Did you guys hear RJ Hunter's quote after the first game against Baylor? They were talking about whether they saw his dad fall off the stool when he hit the 3, and he said, "I knew before the game that stool was going to be a problem. You need to give that man a chair with a back because the stool's not going to work." And I just found that hilarious that he basically was like, "I knew this was going to happen," but it was made for a point of moment, and I think Hunter, the coach Hunter, after the game said, "Hey, this is going to be on one shining moment," and it really was probably the shining moment of the entire tournament so far.
Yeah. By the way,
not for me. Go ahead.
Really funny. Ron Hunter was talking about how this is RJ's last time together, and someone said, but he's just a junior, and Ron said, well, I'm going to try and convince him to come back and play again, but I think he's going to the NBA, which I thought was kind of amusing considering he's the father, and he was like, I'm gonna do my best. I'm gonna talk to him as much as I can and try to convince him to play one more season with me, but I think he knows his son is headed off to the NBA, which is kind of sad because Georgia State could be really, really great if he came back for one more, but oh well.
Yeah. Well, they ruined my bracket because I foolishly decided to ride with Rico Gathers and Baylor, and that totally didn't work out for me. I also was riding with Virginia, and they're out. But I did nail that NC State was going to take out Villanova.
Nice.
I have faith in the Wolfpack. I put that in my bracket, and I got some dap from my from my bracket group that I play with my high school friends for picking that game. So I'm very much still alive because I'm the only one in my bracket group that has my particular national champion, but I won't share who I picked as my national champion, for privacy's sake. Anyway,
I'm guessing NC State's over Villanova's your best pick. My best pick, I think, probably was I had Wichita State beating Kansas. I mean, that's not even that great a pick. Donald, what's your best pick so far?
I was going to say that was probably my best pick was Wichita State over Kansas because, I mean, for backstory, Kansas and Wichita State, Kansas will not play Wichita State at all. And, Wichita State every year asks to play Kansas, and they know that they have more to gain from playing Kansas than Kansas does by playing Wichita State. Kansas has been ducking them for years, and when the seeding came out, I picked that immediately because I knew what was going to happen as far as what happens when the team finally gets to play the team that they've wanted to play all these years. And you could see Wichita State I won't say dominated, but carried the game from start to finish and really, really was up for this game more than Kansas will ever be. So they made me look great for at least a couple hours before continue through my life.
One of you guys, I forget who it was, wasn't one of you guys that mentioned last week that Dayton, after playing their home game, was going to be playing in Columbus, and lo and behold, Dayton won their first round game, and they gave Oklahoma some trouble as well. So that's a really nice call as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, I picked that
I
as well,
that
but I picked Oklahoma to win.
Even though this weekend ended up being pretty chalky, we got a lot of good games and a lot of fun tournament, especially on that first day. That first day was wild. So I'm very happy with the quality of the NCAA tournament so far. I think that the best outcome is that we have a lot of close games and that we get a couple upsets, but that once we get to the Sweet 16, the good teams are still left. And I think that absent maybe Virginia, that's what we got out of this weekend. Is that next weekend we're going to see most of the really good teams still in the tournament.
The best part of this weekend has been throughout all the bracket anarchy that has happened so far, and I'm not going to, as I say this, it has not happened to us. We've had probably two of the easiest games that any team has had in this tournament other than Kentucky. So with all the mayhem that's around us, we're kind of staying out of it, which I appreciate.
Well, by the way, Duke's margin of victory is the highest of any team in the tournament right now. Our games, in fact, if you saw the Kentucky-Cincinnati game, that was I don't want to say it was a nip and tuck game, but that was a reasonably tight game for much of that contest. Duke has had the easiest. I don't want to say they've had the easiest in terms of their opponents, but in terms of how the games have gone, Duke has had the easiest two games so far of any team in the tournament, I think.
Let's hope that keeps up.
I agree.
And we'll finish here as we always do by picking our players of the week. So now that we've come back to Duke, I will start with Jason. Who was your player of the week?
Well, as great as I thought Justice Winslow was, I went with Big Jazilla, Jahlil Okafor. All he did on the week was hit 77.7% of his field goals. All he did was basically set the tone in both games very early on and establish the fact that he was going to score at will, and you were not going to be able to stop him from scoring at will. A really, really great weekend for him. He averaged almost a point a minute. He had 21 points against Robert Morris in 21 minutes of playing time, and against San Diego, he had 26 points in 33 minutes of playing time. So that's good. That's really, really good. And I think any opponent looking at Duke, Utah, certainly looking at the tape of the two games this weekend, is going to be like, we have no idea how to stop this guy. And I think the reason you're going to start to see more and more announcers and commentators talking about the eagerly anticipated matchup of Duke and Kentucky in the national championship game is because they're going to all look at Duke and say that Kentucky size, that Kentucky length, no one can handle it. But the one team that may be able to handle it is Duke, because Jahlil Okafor is a beast. He's unlike anything else that we've seen in college basketball this year. And by the way, really quick, he had a really nice weekend defensively, I think. 5 blocks in the two games. And I thought the game against San Diego State may have been his best defensive game of the year.
Donald? With Justice Winslow, for some of the reasons that I hinted at earlier when we were discussing, the 0-0 stat line, I think Justice was the guy that really helped us on both ends of the floor the most this weekend. On both ends of the floor, that you could see him hustling back to, when there was what seemed to be a fast break by San Diego State a couple times. He was one that would either knock the pass away or even steal it. Or in certain cases, he would let them, go all the way to the basket and then block the heck out of them. He really was locked in on this game. And I'm sure he was probably the person that was easiest for the weekend to get away from him, knowing what was at stake. A return home to his hometown of Houston. But he was really locked in, especially today against San Diego State. He was the man. And as much as Ja was the man, I think Justice was equally, if not more, the man, and he is my player of the week.
Yeah, I also went with Winslow this week. Averaged over 10 rebounds a game for the weekend. He had over 10 rebounds in both games. Had a double-double today against San Diego State, in which he was really filling up the stat sheet. And I like that you pointed out, and I wanted to echo that this was a weekend where Justice Winslow could have had issues, knowing that if we won, we'd be going back to his hometown of Houston, and he locked down, and really, especially in that first half against San Diego State, set the tone on both ends of the floor. For that to be a sort of cruiser of a win against a really good opponent. So I also went with Winslow. However, we should give the special shout, and I think one of you already did, to Marshall Plumlee for his double-double against Robert Morris. He didn't need to play as much today against San Diego State, and the limited minutes that he had were not great. He was one assist away from recording a 7 trillion for this afternoon. But yeah, he did have the double-double against Robert Morris. We didn't see a whole lot of Tyus Jones this weekend. Curious to see if we see him show up again in some of the higher profile matchups that we're hoping to see in Houston next week. But good fix, definitely. For me, it was really between Winslow and Okafor. I feel like that's probably the way that most Duke fans feel this weekend, is that they were really the catalysts for these victories, to be as frankly easy as they were. So, all right, I think we've covered everything.
Let me. I want to chime in about a couple other things, just really, really quickly.
Sure.
You mentioned Justice going back to Houston, and we've seen the past couple games how much he's the engine that drives Duke playing really, really at the next level. I think when Justice plays really well, that's when we're at our best. And for some reason, there are other guys who, if they're a little up and down, it doesn't seem to affect our play quite as much as it does as when he's up and down. I think it's because there are some things that he does athletically that just no one else on the floor is able to do. But I'm concerned about him going back to Houston. He's going to be inundated with ticket requests from 40 and 50 and 100 of his closest friends. Everyone's going to be, in his ear wanting to talk to him and talk to him about, the future millions he's going to be making in the NBA and wanting to get close to their old buddy and stuff like that. I really hope he's able to keep all that under control. I hope Duke's able to minimize the distractions for him, and he's able to continue to play the way he's been playing, because it's a really, really big deal for him to play well, because that's the key for Duke. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, in the postseason, I'm counting both the ACC tournament and the NCAA tournament now. We're yet to see Tyus Jones have a better than usual game for him. He's had decent games, okay games, but his scoring has been significantly off. His shot has really been off. He's just not putting the ball in the bucket the way he was really throughout the entire month of February. And that's one of the big things I think I'm going to be looking for next weekend. If Duke's going to go to the Final Four, I think we're going to have to be sitting here talking about Tyus stepping up from where he's been the past couple weeks, because his ACC tournament and NCAA tournament performances thus far have left a little bit to be desired.
Did you have anything else to add to what Jason was just saying, or anything else?
No, he hit the nail on the head. It's especially for Winslow next week. I don't know how tall NRG Stadium is, what used to be called Reliant. I still call it Reliant. But they may want to open up the roof for the first 5 minutes of the game, because he's going to want to jump through, over, out of the gym literally in his hometown and really show off it. But I think, if any team is going to be the ones to pull him in and make sure that he's focused and that all outside distractions are to a minimal, I think it's this team. These guys have really got each other's back. They're really, in tune with each other and know how big this is for him, and just as it is for everybody on the team. So I'm not too worried about his performance. It's just I think he's going to have some of those hometown jitters for the first 5 minutes of the Sweet 16, but can he calm down and push through that and get down to business? That's what we're going to see. And Tyus, and just like Jason said, needs to step up. Point blank, he's hasn't had the best last couple of weeks, and we're really going to need him against Utah. So I think he can do better, and I think he will.
Yeah, Jason made the point about Justice Winslow going home and how it might be a kind of distraction for him. It reminded me, and I don't know if you guys remember this. Over the summer, I shared a story with the other DBR moderators about running into former UConn coach Jim Calhoun at the airport in Denver. Do you guys remember me telling you about this?
Vaguely, yeah.
I talked to him for like 10 minutes. Because I recognized him. I was like, oh my gosh, it's Jim Calhoun. And I talked to him about all kinds of different things, NCAA and certain games and players and stuff. But one of the most interesting things that he shared with me was that when they would get their bracket selection, he always hoped that they would be getting sent out west because he wanted to minimize all that stuff that Jason was just talking about, the ticket requests and the friends and family and all that stuff. And we on the DVR, I feel like a lot of the times the discussion goes to, I hope that Duke gets to stay in Charlotte or Greensboro or wherever the first round is, and then that we get to go to the regional in Washington or New York or somewhere nearby that has a lot of friends and is close to home. But there is that other side of the coin where those distractions do sometimes play a part, and yeah, like you guys said, I hope that Winslow's able to compartmentalize that, and I hope the staff is on top of it, which I imagine they are. If these are issues that we are thinking about, you have to figure that the Coach K machine is all over it. But this is something that we will look forward to seeing. So I think with that we can wrap. Like we mentioned, we will be back late Friday to record an extra episode regardless of the outcome of the game on Friday night. We are hoping that Duke will prevail against Utah and that we'll get to be previewing a UCLA or Gonzaga game, but that remains to be seen. So for this week, for Donald Wine, for Jason Evans, I am Sam Klein. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. We'll talk to you again soon, and let's have the marching band take us out.